How was your weekend?
My weekend was good. I was mostly doing a bit of heavy gardening, so to speak.
Heavy gardening.
And so I'm nursing some aches and bruises all over, but still recovering.
From the University of Toronto, I'm Beth Coleman.
I'm Rahul Krishnan.
This is What Now AI.
It's one of the things that we don't think about until we have to, which is our health.
Yeah, so Rahul, this is really your wheelhouse in terms of research, and I'm very excited that we get to talk about this today. A lot of the news around AI is very doom and gloom. The prospects, the things that are possible in terms of AI, medicine, and kind of future of health, really the question we're asking is innovation for good.
So healthcare is a very multifaceted field, and in today's episode, we're going to be diving in to talk about both the human aspects of healthcare delivery as well as AI and drug development. I spoke with Dr. Andrew Pinto, who's the founder and the director of the Upstream Lab, a research team focused on addressing social determinants of health, population health management, and utilizing data science for proactive care. Dr. Pinto is a family physician at St. Mike's Hospital, an associate professor at U of T's MD Faculty of Medicine and the Dalla Lana School of Public Health.
And I spoke with Krishnan Allen, who's a full professor at U of T's Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy. She's a member of the scientific leadership team of the Acceleration Consortium at U of T. Allen is a co-founder and CEO of Intrepid Labs, Inc., a company that is accelerating pharmacy drug development through the integration of AI, automation, and advanced computing. We caught up with Allen at Intrepid Labs, so let's get into it. Hi, Christine, calling in from New York City. It's such a pleasure to get to talk to you.
Great to see you, even if only virtually. Great to see you.
Okay, so I've got, I don't know, a million questions for you. Are you ready?
I think I'm ready.
Good. All right, so we're going to start with only the easy ones. What is drug discovery using AI?
So I would say to you that you will probably have seen a lot of work around the integration of AI or use of AI in drug discovery. So that's identification of new drug candidates, new molecules that could potentially be used as therapeutics, right, using AI. And there are other areas where AI is being quite useful, actually, in the entire drug development pipeline. I work in drug formulation, so it's immediately adjacent to drug discovery in that drug development pipeline. So I would say that through drug discovery, you identify this molecule with potential therapeutic applications. I consider that the passenger. The formulation is essentially the plane, right? So we're designing the plane that will take that drug, take that passenger to where it needs to go so it can exert its therapeutic effect in a safe manner.
So can you talk about where AI fits into the formulation process?
When I think of the way that AI has been used in drug development to date, for the most part, it's been in drug discovery and clinical development. And where I think we really need it, and certainly that's where this new company is focused, is around drug formulation. So just to give you a sense of the daunting task that formulation of a drug can be. For a drug that is to be administered orally, there are more than 10 billion possible formulations that could be used for delivery of that drug. 10 billion possible formulations. This is not a number that the human mind can contemplate, right? This is a very complicated, tremendous design space. And so when we look at the drugs that have been formulated orally and the compositions of matter that have been used, we've only scratched the surface. We estimate that less than 0.01% of that total design space has been explored. And so it's this concept of using AI to explore the unexplored. And what if, that formulation that could really transform the properties and performance of your drug is one of those unexplored formulations, right? And that will then, take that drug through clinical development smoothly and get it to patients faster, which is really the goal.
Christine, that's pretty incredible. I know you're modest, but are you one of the first groups to bring this process to drug formulation?
I have to say we are, and it's really thanks to great discussions with Ilan Asper-Guzik about 5 years ago. In fact, I was sitting with him chatting about something else, and I said to him, can you help me find someone that would be willing to work with us in this area? And he said, well, why wouldn't you work with me?
Intrepid Labs Incorporated is the first startup to emerge from the Acceleration Consortium, a U of T institutional strategic initiative led by Alan Asper-Guzik that uses self-driving labs to expedite the discovery of materials and molecules crucial for a sustainable future. Alan and Asper-Guzik are combining their expertise in pharmaceutical sciences, AI, and machine learning to develop new drug formulations faster.
He and I started chatting about this and started involving graduate students from each of our labs, which is always fun, right? Different, students from different labs working in very different disciplines now working together. Yeah. So very powerful. And they just moved the research forward.
Can you talk about the Intrepid Lab motto, better medicine fast? I mean, how does this kind of work impact a public? And when we hear fast, it's hard not to think about Meta and other groups who have historically been moving fast and breaking things. So I'd like to hear what your confidence is in fast in this case.
It's a great question. So I often say better medicine, faster and cheaper. Just to share a few stats with you, it's a little hard to believe in this day and age with all of the technology that we have, that it's about 1 in 10 drugs that actually succeeds in clinical development. So about 90% of the drugs that enter clinical development fail. And it's, those numbers to me are really hard to believe and frankly unacceptable. And in particular, if you've been a patient, let's say you're a patient, you've been on different lines of therapy, and you're watching to see a molecule or a drug moving through the clinic, and this may be your last best hope, and that drug fails in a phase 2 or a phase 3 clinical trial. And when that drug fails, it's very unlikely that it's going to get another chance in the clinic, right? Oftentimes the drug gets one chance. The other thing is if it's a first mover, if it's a drug that's first in class, it may kill an entire class of drugs for many years. So that's the first thing that I would say is that we need to do better. The pharmaceutical industry, the community, we need to do better, across the entire drug development pipeline in terms of, addressing the low success rate or high failure rate, however you want to put it. I believe that we don't always move the best formulations of drugs into the clinic. So I mentioned before that drug discovery or identification of that molecule, that active pharmaceutical ingredient, is that first step. And many people look at that and think, oh, one and done. This is the most important step, the only step that matters. And in fact, there are about 99 steps after that to get that drug across the line such that it's approved for use in humans. And one of them that's grossly underrated, under-resourced, is formulations. So, this is where our technology really comes in. It's really about identifying the best formulation, a fully optimized formulation of that drug, such that we put our best foot forward when that drug goes into the clinic.
So what is your sense about drug formulation for special populations where you have very tiny numbers of people? And I don't know if pediatric patients are relevant in terms of this question. So I'll start with the first one in terms of special populations.
That's a great question. And we have thought about that. And pediatric formulations is actually a big challenge. I would say that because we can design formulations so quickly, according to a target product profile, that this is something that would be easy for us to do. If you have an adult formulation for a specific drug, we could, take from that as a bit of a starting point, but with a good understanding of what we want the target product profile to be for children, we could certainly design formulations for children. And in fact, one example that we worked on recently in the lab was just that here at Intrepid. We did have a company, a potential partner that approached us interested in formulating a drug for a pediatric population. And so we just did a case study, which is often something that we do just to demonstrate our potential to a prospective partner. And so we had some target performance metrics that we had established, and just in a few days, we were able to design a formulation that met that profile. And that's what I'm so excited about here, is this is not a daunting task for us anymore, which it was.
So, Christine, if I'm understanding you right, customization is not a science fiction future tense. This is something that is almost in hand now.
I mean, I really hope so, Beth. I think that's where we need to go, certainly. I mean, we are all so different. When we talk about diverse patient populations, right? We are all so different, and we have to recognize those differences and understand the impact that it has on outcomes, patient outcomes. This comes back to, though it's not the topic, it comes back to the importance of ensuring that every single model that we use in research, that we understand what that model is who that model is representative of. I am, as a scientist, I'm accountable. I think it does come down to the scientists or the humans that are in the loop being accountable. This is where it's so important to have humans, even when we talk about AI, in the loop, right? To ensure that the research that we are doing is responsible, is ethical, and that we're genuinely, developing drugs that are going to treat everyone. It's just so critically important.
Scale is not the same thing as customization. It's kind of the opposite.
I don't see them as being separate because, you can change the look and feel of your Apple MacBook Pro in many, many different ways. And at the end of the day, it's still a general purpose device that is capable of some form of customization.
Right.
With machines that build these drugs, I think the trick is to get to a device that, given an individual's profile, can then customize the molecules for them. And that's the trick. And I have no idea how to solve it, but I think if it existed, it would be...
It's a pretty good trick.
Andrew, as a clinician as well as a scientist, you work both in terms of delivering care as well as thinking of how we can improve the quality of care, improve equity in care, using a variety of computational tools. I was wondering if you could sort of give us an overview of some of the work that your lab does.
The team that I lead is called the Upstream Lab. We divide our work into 3 main areas that all intersect tackling the social determinants of health, using artificial intelligence, and then also conducting clinical trials of interventions. We're also doing work on things like respiratory surveillance. So can we automate detection of rising respiratory illness cases or unusual patterns? And then within the AI work that we're doing, it's quite a few different areas. One is kind of tackling the administrative burden. When we started to do this work around AI in primary care, we really knew that we wanted to be directed by primary care providers and patients rather than just kind of what cool things could we do with data. So we actually did a national deliberative dialogue with different groups from across Canada to say, if we have these AI tools, where should we put them? And the things that people came up with were things like, help us with the administrative burden, help us serve more people, given that we are facing this crisis. And that's what's kind of directed our work. So I think some of the key areas will be, and some of the work that we're doing is, how do we automate these admin tasks that doctors and other members of the primary care team are spending way too much time doing? Everything from documentation of a visit. As a family doctor, I spend a lot of time just putting data in, which could be collected by an intelligent program and actually put in for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've got friends who've already told me about going to the doctor and having an AI scribe in the room. Not everybody is comfortable with kind of a machine assistant in the room, but a lot of people are perfectly comfortable with it. And it seems like a great way to reduce certain types of labor.
I agree. I think the real emphasis on AI in healthcare is really being able to put, more of the care back in healthcare. I think clinicians over the last few decades have spent so much more of their time doing things that aren't patient-facing, which is the thing that they were trained to do, that I'm hopeful that tools and AI can give them back some of that autonomy to engage better with patients and have more meaningful connections with their patients as they guide them through the process of delivering care.
From your interactions with patients, what
do you find that they might be interested in doing with their own health records? Like imagine if your patients could open up an app on their phone and be able to interact with the healthcare data the same way you open up emails on the Gmail app, for example.
An interesting thing is that consistently patients want to have access to their data, but they also need an overlay of interpretation. Right now, the way these portals are working is people just get access to the raw data.
Yeah.
And it's just not that helpful sometimes. And we have had a lot of people who get worried suddenly. They're like, I saw these lymph nodes grew, or I saw this red number or something. So I think with some work between patients and clinicians, we could help interpret and help people see this, you don't need to worry about this, but also this is the trend. This is kind of where you're going. We have a project right now that's under review for funding that would propose integrating family history and social data with genomic data to provide much more tailored suggestions around prevention of disease.
Let's say a large language model that gets deployed as a scribe. How can we ensure that it's performing at parity or across different groups?
Yeah.
Because in some sense, these models are designed to always produce an output, which means they run the risk of perhaps failing silently.
Yeah, it's where one is right now in Canada, we don't have a great process of regulation of these types of devices. They exist in this kind of gray space between a full medical device and then just some random app that someone's created. So we need to have very urgently, we need some sort of regulatory approach to these. I think the part of that regulation would be mandating and just building within the workflow is this type of assessment of bias. So that any type of app that's being deployed within health settings, there is this assessment of, is it working the same across different groups? And starting just with, for example, people who identify as men, women, and then moving to more like, does it work across different age groups and different racial groups, and people who are newcomers, people where English isn't the first language. This is all really important because otherwise there's a risk that this new technology is actually going to worsen disparities, because it could work really, really well for one group and then leave others kind of behind. I think in terms of equity considerations, the most obvious one is that all of these technologies are driven by data. And what do you do for the people where there isn't that data? So I think a lot about my patients who, because of social challenges, because of homelessness, because they're experiencing incarceration, because of other challenges, they are not coming in. And they certainly don't have a cell phone. They don't have that data being collected. So what happens to them, and is there a risk that they get left further and further behind while you have a group of people who are affluent, well-educated, can afford smartphones and have data plans, and their data is being linked right into their chart? So that's like an obvious area where we have to always think about, are we leaving certain groups behind? I think the other piece is around, we always want to be really transparent with patients about what's happening with their data, who has access to it, what's the use of it for. We're already at a stage where there's a lack of trust because there have been all these instances of data breaches and things like that. So engaging community members and patients at the start and forefronting equity considerations, I think, will be a big part of this. And a lot of patient partners that I work with, they really can see that, and they really like that these tools could actually help to create equity. They could actually help us so that we're not just focusing on our energy on the people who are loud and can advocate for themselves, but we're actually using these tools to look at all of the patients in a population and then focus our attention on the people who need it the most.
I think the other piece of this is also, in the context of education at least, is minimizing the tendency to trust the machine on everything.
Yeah.
Like you still want to teach students how to retain their ability to be objective, even when the machine has given them 100, 500, 1,000 correct answers.
We need to be training our medical students and residents and other trainees not for the system we have right now, but the system that we're going to have 5 or 10 years from now.
Star Trek, when Bones would run the little rod over people and make different sounds. So that's kind of like That's the ideal. One instrument, no matter what it is, broken bones, broken heart, Vulcan mind meld, you just run it across and it makes it sounds, and then you can diagnose what's going on.
I think that there have been a lot of attempts to start to miniaturize a lot of the big machines that we have in hospitals. Ultrasounds, for example. We now have ultrasound devices that can be hooked up to an iPhone that are about as small as an electric shaver. And so that's a huge reduction in size that, eventually hope takes us towards an all-purpose tricorder device that tells us what's wrong with the human body. But to be honest, even if it doesn't tell us everything that's wrong, if it gets us to 80% of everything that could go wrong with a human, that's already incredibly useful.
How could artificial intelligence impact healthcare?
I'm Alexis Krentovsky, and I'm a double major in human biology and book and media studies. I would say the most promising or exciting developments in AI in healthcare would have to be, I'm personally excited about precision probiotic development in regards to AI can speed up the formulation process that pharmaceutical companies use towards creating these probiotics for specific patient profiles and kind of giving an alternative medicine source for people who haven't been able to find things that help them with their disease.
From the University of Toronto, this is What Now AI.
Listen to us wherever you get your podcasts and watch us on YouTube.